What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video, and before we get into the match analysis between Atletico Madrid and Manchester City and how Manchester City went through against Atletico and why this was such a special game, check out the OneFootball app. They're sponsoring today's video, and it's the best app out there for all things football. You stay up to date with the latest games, biggest news, biggest players, and your favorite teams. It's the app I use. I'm using it just there on your screen. There's a free download, a link in the description below, so be sure to support the channel and check that out. Again, it's completely free download, and it's the best app out there to follow all things football. Highly recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to you guys if I didn't have it downloaded myself. And the video is brought to you by them. They're a big part of why this channel can exist. So be sure to check that out. Also, when you're in the description, check out both my books and Keyframe. There's links to all that in the description. Keyframe's how I'm making this video. Now let's get right into the tactics of the match. Now we're going to start with Atletico Madrid in possession because a lot of people have been criticizing them and have a very strong opinion about them. But there's a very tactical approach to what they do. And they start with a back five, but here they build from the back with more of a back four with deep lying fullbacks. This allows them to create asymmetry within their team, with Lodi dropping deeper, allowing Llorente to go higher up the field and create this asymmetry. They then go with a three-man midfield with a single pivot and two more advanced options. Then with two strikers as well, they create a very narrow offensive structure that allows for pinning and overloads on this right-hand side to lead to fast progression and interchanges on one side of the field. Atletico don't really circulate the ball in terms of trying to progress. It's very much overloading one side and progressing through tight connections and fast play. Now, Manchester City started in a 4-4-2 with advanced wide midfielders to then go and press Atletico and to deny them free progression into the midfield third. And because of the way Atletico Madrid play and how Manchester City pressed in this way to try and have more ball recoveries in the final third with a 4-4-2 using their cover shadow and going to press the central defender. De Bruyne didn't drop deeper to cut off the circulation of possession because Atletico are so dominantly progressing through the side that they start on. So there's no need to try and isolate possession because Atletico Madrid do that themselves. But this is by design because of the overloads and the very direct play and implications their shape has. Now here's an even better example of Atletico in their build-up using their first four players in their first line of build-up and creating asymmetry on this right-hand side. Now we have our single pivot, mostly there to control transitions and for second balls. And now we have our overloads, our inverted wingback, and a very narrow offensive structure of Llorente playing off of Griezmann on this right-hand side. And then behind them, they'll have players like João Felix running in behind, trying to drop deeper, get on the ball in between the lines, and our weak side attacking midfielders occupying the weak side half space. And what this does, creates partnerships and overloads through the half spaces and towards the wide areas as well that allows them to have more stability when they're trying to progress through these overloads. It also plays on Manchester City's structure by having Manchester City press so high up the field. It creates a bit more space for these players to overload and progress the ball through. And oftentimes in the wide area, it's much easier to transition and recover from. Now in the midfield third, especially towards the second half and the latter stages of the game, they really started to go for it and come out and progress and try and create dangerous goal scoring opportunities. So now we still have our single pivot with our three central defenders in build-up, but now the wingbacks occupy positions of height and width. And now we have our midfield diamond because of our two attacking midfielders highlighted here, and by having a player like João Cancelo in the team being able and willing to drop deeper between the lines with his strike partner occupying height. And what this does is it creates, again, pinning and deliberate positioning between defenders of Manchester City, forcing the back four of Manchester City to stay deeper and not jump into the midfield. Also, with Manchester City's aggressive press, especially in the mid-block, it creates an opportunity for Manchester City to be beaten in behind by Atletico Madrid, and it allows Atletico a little more space through the wide central defenders in the half spaces to try and get on the ball and play vertical passes between the lines straight to the Atletico Madrid players. And the fluidity of the front two and two attacking midfielders from Atletico cause a lot of problems, overloading the area around the two holding midfielders of Manchester City. Now, if we just highlight the 4-4-2 of Manchester City, now the second striker is much deeper here for Manchester City, almost creating a 4-5-1. But now let's highlight the Atletico Madrid offensive structure with our three central defenders, asymmetry from our wingbacks, one creating more width and the other creating width and height. Then we can start to see our overload. So we have our single pivot, and joined by an attacking midfielder and the two strikers, we have an overload around this right half space where the ball is being progressed. And through the vertical implication of the central defender's actions, it creates this opportunity for Atletico to have many players between the lines around the ball carrier. So by driving forward, a vertical pass can be played, or a longer pass can be played into one of these players or in their direction. That gives Atletico a fast way to progress the ball, and it also gives them a good opportunity to counterpress and win the ball back higher up the field if the pass doesn't connect. And the important thing is we still have access on this weak side. Not so much to progress the ball through, but to have players arriving in these dangerous areas from the weak side with diagonal implications when the ball is progressed through this overloaded side. So much different from how Manchester City or Liverpool would overload one side to isolate the other. Atletico overload one side to progress through it and have less of an occupation of players on the weak side to then finish their chances. Now we can get into the other extreme of football and a positional play approach that emphasizes possession as a tool to break down Atletico, who then try to control the game without the ball. So Manchester City, no surprises, built with a back four, split by Ederson and their goalkeepers. Their fullbacks created variable width, with the fullbacks being able to change their width, going a little bit more narrow to control transitions or shore up circulation, or as well go wider to attract Atletico Madrid players. We have our single pivot of Rodri, and ahead of him we have our two offensive midfielders of Kevin De Bruyne and Ilkay Gundogan. Then from here we'll either have Phil Foden or Bernardo Silva creating our fourth man between the lines, often overloading this area to then try and overload Atletico Madrid and progress past them. Now, Atletico Madrid defensive structure was just as deliberate and hard to play against as their offensive structure, which Manchester City did really well to then keep them at a 0-0 draw and progress past in the Champions League semifinals. So with Manchester City entering the semifinals, Atletico Madrid is knocked out of the competition. But now, just behind the first striker, João Felix, we have a midfield three and two wingback, who one is on the weak side position deeper. So Renan Lodi now jumping higher to then create access to Kyle Walker on this left-hand side, and Griezmann on the right, who's not the wingback but more of a right midfielder, tracking the run of Cancelo, again creating asymmetry in this Atletico Madrid defense. But Koke was often the player jumping, especially in this right half space, to then use his cover shadow to block access to these players between the lines for Manchester City. So this staggered structure has a lot of spatial control principles using cover shadows and vertical partnerships. And that's why when Koke would jump, the right central defender would jump as well to maintain the spaces between the lines. Now going deeper, we start to see Atletico Madrid's clear 5-4-1 low block. This saw Griezmann drop to the right side from his central striker position as a right midfielder, and leaving João Felix as the single striker. Now Cancelo is the left fullback, playing in a wider role and allowing for then Kyle Walker to come in this inverted position with his other back four. And Kyle Walker is crucial in a game like this because of his physical qualities and his defensive effectiveness to control transitions of Atletico. So he was absolutely crucial in this match against Atletico Madrid, and by playing this deeper and more inverted position, it just facilitated him to use all his defensive qualities. From here, we have players occupying the space between the lines of Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, and Ilkay Gundogan, with now Phil Foden occupying a wider area with Mahrez. So with these three offensive players often having the option of Phil Foden to invert between the lines to then create more passing options gave Atletico Madrid a lot to worry about. But Atletico Madrid handled this with the jumping of Koke to the left central defender Laporte when he would progress the ball, using the cover shadow of Koke to block access to Ilkay Gundogan, and control the threat between the lines from Manchester City. Now Manchester City in their normal base build-up shape with a 2-3 build-up with wide fullbacks, with Rodri being at the center of this. And we then go back to our typical 3 attacking midfielders of Manchester City, with now Phil Foden making narrow runs in behind to try and create space against this very vertically and horizontally compact Atletico Madrid 5-4-1. Now we see Mahrez on this right-hand side, just off our screen to the bottom right, is often isolated and being available to use as an overload and isolate concept. Atletico Madrid forced Manchester City to play with a very narrow build-up structure as we see them here, to then have them control Atletico Madrid in transition. But we see Atletico Madrid's 4-man midfield here and their back 5, and seeing the compactness, there's only about 10 yards between their midfielders and defenders, with their central defenders paying attention to vertical partnerships with the midfielders. So Koke jumps a little bit, and so does the right central defender of Atletico Madrid, to then maintain this control over the space between the lines. Now João Felix picked his moments when to go and press, but the priority was to maintain control over Rodri so that Atletico couldn't be broken through central areas of the field. And now for our last picture of Manchester City, we then go back with our deeper back 4 in the build-up phase, but a very controlled build-up from Manchester City, with Kevin De Bruyne now dropping into this left half space, Ilkay Gundogan going as the number 10, and Bernardo Silva on the right-hand side. Bernardo Silva and Riyad Mahrez work very well together because of their potential to vertically interchange their positions and fan out into the wide areas. Often, Manchester City also played it very safe, not trying to target this weak side half space player of Ilkay Gundogan when the ball would be circulated, because these diagonal passes from the right half space into the central corridor and left half space is very dangerous against a team like Atletico Madrid, because Atletico Madrid is so dangerous when they have their defenders jump into these areas, and by playing with a back 5, Atletico Madrid is more ready to make these defenders jump and put in a challenge against these players. Now the staggering of the midfield also allowed the players to occupy different horizontal and vertical planes, which Manchester City looked to control through very narrow build-up structures and their fullbacks staying deeper and more narrow, where a completely different match and tactic from the Liverpool match with Kyle Walker and Cancelo occupying full width and height. They're playing against a very different opponent that doesn't allow space in any of the center parts of the field and sets very distinct pressing traps with a very aggressive back line that, if they didn't go with a very narrow build-up shape, the game could get very stretched and very volatile very quickly. Now, huge props to Manchester City. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Atletico Madrid's style, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.